It's been reported that on the on the May 20th Raw, prior to the show going live, Nash and Waltman pull what's been described as a power play backstage, threatening to quit if something wasn't rewritten. And they do this grandstand when Vince and Stephanie aren't there. Shane McMahon is there, and he gives in to their demands. Do you remember what the story on this was? Does any of this ring a bell?
It rings a bell because I wasn't there. And as we talked about earlier, I was in Houston with my wife going through treatment, but I heard about it long distance.
And what did you hear? Like, what happened?
I heard that obviously none of us were there, Vince and Stephanie in particular, and that guys, and it wasn't just X-Pac and Nash, but that the boys were trying to get to Shane and trying to influence Shane to change everything. And Shane, being there alone and being the authority figure in real life, may have gotten a little overwhelmed, but that's hearsay, and that's getting it from different sources that were there going, oh shit, we had all this stuff approved by Vince and Steph, and everybody's on board, and now they're changing shit, and we don't have Vince to come in and be that final, the buck stops here.
What did Vince think when this happened?
He wasn't pleased.
Is the heat on Nash for pushing to get something changed, or is the heat on Shane for allowing it, or both?
Both. But I would have to think it's always going to be on the kids. It's always, if I was there, the heat would have been on me. So it's always going to be on the kid. Damn it, Shane, you should have done this. You should have done that. You do the best you can in the situations in which you are in.
On the June 3rd Raw, Nash said he has a big announcement to make, and later in the show, he comes down and said he's going to announce a new member of the NWO, Shawn Michaels. Whose idea was it to bring Shawn in, and what was the long-term plan with this storyline?
The idea to bring Shawn back was obviously Shawn was feeling a little better, feeling a little froggy, thinking about coming back, and it was another way to introduce a new old character back into the fold. The last time that Hall and Nash were in WWF, they were together. They were feuding against each other, but everybody knew the clique and the friendship between Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels. So it was a way to kind of reintroduce him, but we weren't really sure at this point. There was really no talk of Shawn even coming back full time. This was just let's test the waters, see what's out there. Maybe Shawn will get the bug.
A few days before this, Shawn was on the WWF Confidential show, and this is a shoot type show they did for a little while on the weekends, kind of a short-lived program, but it was fun. And during this program where Shawn is on it, he publicly admits for the first time that he knew about the Montreal screw job. Prior to this, he had just denied it. So that happens, and then he's on Raw, so Shawn's back in a big way. On the June 10th Raw, Shawn comes out for his big promo and a loud HBK chant. Shawn starts off very humble and reserved. He says it's the fans who decide which direction they go as an organization. And he said it was you fans that dumped me and ran to Steve Austin like a cheap nickel and dime prostitute runs to a millionaire.
Whores.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd give me the Terry Funk line.
They're all whores.
Shawn said that the one man who stood behind him at every step, who stayed his friend through thick and thin, was Kevin Nash. The NWO comes out. Shawn says he noticed that someone didn't quite fit in the NWO, and he teased it being Big Show and X-Pac, and then Superkick Booker, and says, I thought to myself, well, you're the problem. You see, he's tried to steal the spotlight from the NWO just like Austin tried to steal it from me, just like The Rock tries to steal it from Hunter. So Booker T is literally kicked out of the NWO here. Is the decision here, let's just try to pare this back down to the clique and get rid of this WCW guy?
Somewhat, yes. Is
there any sort of heat for what Shawn's saying here about The Rock tries to steal it from Hunter?
No, that was all written for him.
Okay. Real quick before we move on, Booker gets paired up with Goldust, and I don't know when we're going to talk about this again.
Oh, we will.
This is some hilarious stuff. Whose idea was it to pair them together? We'll talk about all the skits and segments and all that another time, but who puts them together?
Brian Gewirtz, and Brian Gewirtz produced all those damn vignettes.
Phenomenal.
With them, the Star Wars shit. I mean, that was some of the greatest stuff ever.
King of the Ring, the NWO's backstage with Triple H, and he's about to face The Undertaker for the undisputed title. So he hugs a lot of the guys, says what's up to them, and they start to tease that maybe Triple H will join the group. Was there ever any consideration to kind of put the whole clique together here and have them all be a part of the NWO, or did the talks never get that serious about Triple H joining?
It only got to the talking stage. So there wasn't anything more to it. Oh, hey, we could do this, we could do that. It was kind of, what if?
Things continue to go south. Nash returns to the ring on July 8th, and this time it's in a 10-man tag team match. You know where this is going. It's Kevin Nash, Eddie Guerrero, X-Pac, Chris Benoit, and Big Show against Rob Van Dam, Bubba Ray Dudley, Spike Dudley, Booker T, and Goldust. During the match, Nash is tagged in. You know how this ends. He's running across the ring. He suddenly collapses, starts clutching his knee and screaming in pain. Hebner holds up the infamous crossed-armed X and lets everybody in the back know something bad has just happened. And this is the exact same injury you may remember that Triple H took about a year earlier, maybe, and it kept him out of the ring for 8 months. He tears his quad. What was the reaction to this? Obviously, this was like the worst string of bad luck ever. Nash was hurt, and you kind of insinuated maybe it wasn't legitimate in the backstage segment with Bradshaw. He didn't have a match at WrestleMania, and so now he's injured with Bradshaw, and now he's torn his quad, which is a pretty damn major injury, and it happens in his first match back. Is this just the worst bad luck ever for the WWE and Kevin Nash at this point?
It just goes back to the NWO storyline coming in with Snake Bit, and just the hits kept coming. And this was another one. It just wasn't meant to be. So Kevin getting hurt and tearing his quad was the nail in the coffin for the NWO experiment in the WWE.
Yeah, it really did spell the end immediately. The next week, July 15th, the NWO music plays, but Vince comes out, and he says the reason he came out to that music was so the fans could hear it one final time, because there is no more NWO. The NWO is now history. And he said it was just an era that is over, like many other eras in WWE history. Does it feel, to me, it feels like after Hogan breaks away from the group, it's kind of over. That's like strike one.
It really was.
And then when Scott Hall is fired, that's strike two. And now with Nash going down, what do we got left?
You got nothing.
Yeah.
You got nothing. You have the NWO Wolfpack.
Is there any sort of heat on Kevin Nash during this time? Because he's not working at WrestleMania, which I find curious. He has this injury that you kind of hint is maybe less than legitimate against Bradshaw. And then he has a very real injury with tearing the quad on Raw. It feels like they've spent a lot of time, effort, energy, and cash here, and they're not getting a return. But it's not like he intentionally tears his fucking quad. Come on. Is there any heat?
I don't know. There's heat. There's disappointment.
Right.
Because we had high hopes. We really wanted this thing to work, and we're hoping that we would be able to get some benefit out of the damn thing, and it never came to fruition.
Let's kind of briefly touch on what everybody does. We'll talk about it in greater detail later. Big Show and X-Pac break off, start doing their own things. Michaels starts a feud with Triple H, which leads to his full-time return at SummerSlam. He ends up becoming a world champ and does a lot. People thought Triple H and Shawn Michaels were going to have a one-off at the time at SummerSlam, and it really became some of the best work of Shawn Michaels' career in the second act. Nash returned to the WWF on April 7th of 2003. He was attacked by Triple H. They started a feud for Triple H's world title. He loses a hair versus hair match to Jericho later that year and then leaves in January of 2004 when the company doesn't renew his contract. I'm sure we'll have lots of stuff about what Hogan does, but he goes on to lose the undisputed title to The Undertaker at Judgment Day 2002 in Nashville about a month after he won it from Triple H. He has a feud with Kurt Angle, who we just covered in great detail last week, losing to him at the King of Ring in 2002 by tap out. You can go hear all about that in last week's episode. And we also want to touch on the fact that Hogan would actually tag team with Edge and win the WWE tag team titles, which I can't wait to cover someday. They defeated Billy and Chuck on the 4th of July SmackDown, which is awesome. And then they lost those to Christian and Lance Storm. Not a bunch of names you'd normally see associated with Hogan. A fun time in his career there, at least for me. Of course, we all remember the Mr. America thing. That comes out of the WrestleMania 19 street fight match he had with Mr. McMahon. And his last appearance at this time was the June 26th episode of SmackDown, where he teamed with Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, and they lose to Big Show, Charlie Haas, and Shelton Benjamin. And there's been lots of rumor and innuendo, and I want to touch on it, and then we'll move on and kind of put a bow on this week's episode. But there's been a lot of talk on Hogan leaving here in 2003 because he's unhappy with payoffs, specifically his WrestleMania payoff. There's been lots of rumor and innuendo out there that he thought it should be a lot more. He and Vince came to an impasse, and Vince terminates the contract. What really happened?
This is something we'll get into later, and the story really is too long to get into here. But I was inadvertently kind of thrust right into the middle of it, and it stemmed over money. Yeah, it stemmed over money.
So there you go. That's kind of what
we will get into it. That's a long that's going to be in that Hogan episode. That's a long explanation and a long, convoluted, crazy story that we don't nearly have enough time here for today.
Well, I'm looking forward to that one. I think that run of Hogan's career is often overlooked, but it's an important part of the history of Hulk Hogan in the World Wrestling Federation, or WWE, whatever you prefer to call it. Let's kind of wrap up the NWO here, Bruce. Even though their run was very brief in the WWE, and they had one monstrous match with Hogan and Rock at WrestleMania, would you consider overall this to be a success?
No, I would take it. I think it was a failure. The NWO experiment in WWF was a failure.
Was it a bad idea from the start?
I think the idea was good. The execution was not. There are a lot of things, hindsight being 20/20, that maybe we should have done a little bit differently.